It's now Charlie Wiley. Charlie Wiley and I go back to, oh my goodness, I'm 60. By the way, this is the 8th year anniversary week of the John Fredericks Radio Network. I want to thank all of our loyal listeners and our sponsors and advertisers, many of whom have been with me for 8 years. 8-year anniversary show week. And Charlie Wiley and I go back. I'm 60. I first met Charlie when I was in college. I was like 19, and he was running for, I was 18. He was running for Congress. How many years ago was that? 42 years ago. I met Charlie. He was running for Congress in New Jersey as a Republican against Ed Patton. I remember this stuff. I don't know. And I met him. He made a little speech at my doctor's house, actually. The guy that did my appendectomy when I was 18. And that's where I met him. I fell in love with this guy. I'm like, wow, this guy is like, he could be president one day. I was so impressed with him. And he has been all over the place. He worked with AIM for a long time. And he ran again in Congress in 1978 and lost by like 100 votes. Had he won that election, I predicted he would have been president. And I'll stand by that. He's 92. He's a 92-year-old veteran of the Second World War. He's got an 87-year career starting as a child actor. He's a journalist. He's a lecturer. And he's been all over the world 5 times to Wednesday. And he also covered the Vietnam War and was there in the Tet Offensive. So, guys, I think it's suffice to say he's been around the block a little bit. But the thing about Charlie, he's 92, but he's still talking in college campuses and connecting with millennials. So I want to know what they're thinking, and that's why we have him on live from Los Angeles. Charlie Wiley, been too long, man. Great to have you.
Well, it's great to be here, and there's some hope for the kids out there. If you talk to them in a way that they will pick up. I have no problem. I've been up. I go every year since 1991. I have been annually. Every year I go to UC Berkeley and I talk to 700 students.
To Berkeley?
And yeah, at UC Berkeley. And I never have a problem. And that doesn't mean that I'm saying things that are making them happy. I am sure they disagree with most of what I say. But I never have any problem, and I find that across the country I can reach kids, and I reach them at schools everywhere. One of the things that you do, you have to make it absolutely clear you're not going to BS to them. So many of the speakers kind of speak down, and they just don't contact with them, and that's basically what it's all about. If you go out there and you talk straight, you tell them exactly what you mean, but you make sure that you recognize that there are differences. For example, I always tell them that there is no way in hell that anybody can sensibly generalize about millennials, because there's a couple 100 million millennials in the world today. I mean, so how can you generalize?
Right.
And so what I make clear is that any attacks that I make on the behavior of millennials is aimed at those millennials that have self-identified as active political millennials with a certain work. For example, the ones that we sometimes call snowflakes. They want safe places. They don't want to listen to anybody from the other side, and so on. And so I always make it clear I'm not talking about the rest of you. I'm talking about them. And then I always point out, for example, that I have a lot in common with those millennials, and they want safe places. And I understand that. They don't want to hear words that are going to upset them. They don't want to see something written on the maybe somebody has put on the chalk, on the sidewalk with chalk, vote for Trump. And then those are, I can understand. They want to escape from terrible things like that. And what I've got in common is when I was their age, I felt the same way. In fact, the guys I was with, we all pretty much felt that same way. We wanted a safe place. Now, what they do is they go to some college administrator that gives them some place they can all go hide. Unfortunately, the people I was with, we couldn't find anybody like that. I was at a little island called Okinawa. I was on an LST, an amphibious ship. Boy, did we want a safe place. Good Lord, there were people flying all around us that were trying to kill us. And so, yeah, we wanted a safe place. So I understand people wanting a safe place. Unfortunately, we did not have any college administrators that would give us a place, so we had to man our 20 and 40 millimeter guns and make our own safe place. But you let them know that you've got a lot in common with them.
Charlie, so when you talk to them, and obviously they're looking for a safe place, some of them, but there's a lot of hand-wringing right now as we go into 2020 in Trump world, and as you know, I'm a Trump supporter from day one. You know that. So there's a lot of hand-wringing now within Trump world about, look, are we going to lose the millennial vote by this huge margin and swing some of these states that we normally could win? True or false?
Well, I think that you might lose them if you don't play your cards right. But I think if you go out and talk. Now, what I just said, for example, I get overwhelming laughter in an audience. In other words, the handful of kids that self-identify as millennials, the ones that you're talking about that vote on the other side of the spectrum from everything that's sensible, they're a minority, and the reaction I get is they kind of look embarrassed and kind of a little angry. You can tell by looking at them. But the overwhelming majority of the kids are laughing at them like hell. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there's a possibility that you can swing it, just like you can swing a big part of the Latino vote. I mean, we got a big chunk of it, much more than anybody expected, and I think that they can cut into the black vote. And one of the things that they have to do is to get into some of these votes, instead of moving their position over, what they have to do is to explain to the people in those various categories why what we stand for is going to be better for them. I came back from the war in 1946, and at that point, the Republican Party was in a big drive to get a bigger percentage of the black vote. And, of course, at that time, I don't know, we got 20-30% of the black vote. And so after all the years that they have been trying to get that vote, they're down to about 9%. In other words, it has not worked, and that, I don't know, you can do the math how far back 1946 is, but that's a long time to be campaigning and having lost overwhelmingly. And the reason is that they tried to get a vote by changing us instead of convincing those people among any group that we're talking about why we have the best answer to the problem. And you might not be able to move huge numbers of people each election, but you will dig into the big mass, take people away. And the people you take away are going to be the best people, and to some extent that's worked, even though that's not the way we've tried to do it.
So how does Trump get reelected in 2020?
I think by keeping his promises and by doing the things that the overwhelming majority of the people would find sensible. I mean, you know, I'm not a Trump person. I support him most of the time simply because he's saying sensible things, and the people against him are saying stupid things. But I also see a lot of things that he does that I'm not crazy about, to put it mildly. But what he has to do is to make it plain that he is going to keep to his promises, whatever they were. So far, that's working. On the other hand, you know, you can't just keep battling with other people. Some of that's got to come to a halt so that he can spend the time and get the publicity for the things that he's doing that are working. And the news media is at war with him. I think that this newest person that got on the bandwagon to point out what news media is doing wrong is this lady that was the former executive editor that just absolutely made it clear that she thought the New York Times had completely come off the rails, and says the New York Times is slanting the stories. I'm a journalist. I was a journalist, for 1,000 years. I've been over 100 countries in the world. I covered 11 wars. I was 4 times to Vietnam as a foreign correspondent. And so, I know the field. And you know what we need to do? All we need to do is to get journalism back to the first little speech that was given to every freshman class of people who were majoring in journalism.
Right.
I went to New York University as a journalism student. I had some of the best teachers in the world because they were working journalists in the big time in New York.
Right.
And, when you started your classes the first time as a journalism student, they told you what journalism was about. You found it all out in J101. So many of these people have completely given up. There's not even an attempt to stay with what a journalist is supposed to be all about.
Well, the whole model's changed, and the former editor of the New York Times, 2011 to 2014, Jill Abrams, came out with a new book basically called Merchants of Truth, and basically she confirmed what President Trump has been saying for a 4-year period, that what you're dealing with is fake news. I mean, she basically said, look, headlines are fake, their opinion. News analysis, she said, is not news analysis. It is opinion masquerading as news. She said that the New York Times has a incentive to, and she called the Washington Post out as well. She said both of these papers have a financial incentive to opinionate and blast Trump and write negative stories and put opinion in them because it drives clicks, which drives their revenue. And she also said that since they went 100% negative on Trump, that their digital subscriptions went up by 600,000 or 35%. And the worse it is, the more money they make. So she says journalism has been replaced by basically opinion news.
I agree with the money angle of it, but let me say this. It's a terrible issue, and as I say, it started a long time ago, and unfortunately they just kept drifting, and there were not enough people. I'm very proud to say that I was out there leading the charge to say, whoa, you're going in the wrong direction, because I was in Vietnam and was very much involved in the Vietnam War. And I can tell you right now that the overwhelming majority of the American people do not know what was going on the streets of the United States during the Vietnam War. The concept that the American people turned their backs on our veterans, that there was no support for them when they got home and so on, is absolute nonsense. It simply is not true. And if you want to find out how bad the media covered that phase of our history, go to a website that will tell you in detail exactly. And the website is homewithhonor.us. A lot of people screw up. They put com or net or something. But homewithhonor.us. And you will see things that will blow your mind, especially if you're a Vietnam veteran, and you find out that there was a huge homecoming parade on the day that the war ended, which was almost totally not covered by the media. Huge parades, demonstrations showing support for the men throughout the war, completely ignored. The third longest parade in American history. It lasted almost 9 hours. 250,000 people marched in it, and not one of the 3 networks gave it 1 second's coverage during the middle of the Vietnam War. That is all on the record. You don't have to believe a word that anybody tells you. All you have to do is look at that website, and if you're a veteran, it'll infuriate you to find out that while you were fighting, being told that everybody was against you on the home front, and that's absolute nonsense. It just never happened.
Well, Charlie, also you covered the Tet Offensive, and if you were going to really get to the genesis of this, I've only got a couple minutes here, but you covered the Tet Offensive in Vietnam, and this is one of the first things you told me when we met back in 1974. You said that was a tremendous United States military success, and the media called it a colossal failure, and you were one of the only journalists in the United States that had written what a success it actually was. right?
Oh, yeah. It was mind-boggling. We didn't have satellite then, and so what they used to do, they used to fly the kinescopes from the United States to Vietnam
right.
on a regular basis. You could go and look at what was being told to the American people so you could keep up with what they knew about. And so, they used to come in and they'd show them. You could go down and take a look at what other people were covering, what the three major networks were saying about the war. And it took a little extra time during the Tet Offensive to get over there. So I forget, maybe it was like 8-10 days after the offensive started before I was able to see some of the coverage that was going on. I was stunned. I was watching us win the war. I was every place that there was action. I was on the streets of Saigon
right.
Within minutes of the time the Tet Offensive hit Saigon. I was out there covering it.
Right.
I helicoptered into the battle away when the Marines were taking back away. I mean, I was everywhere that you could be. I was watching. Scopes came in from the United States, and here we were losing. And one of the most incredible comments of all time is the head of NBC at the time. I can't remember his name. Anyhow, somebody went up to him a couple of months after the Tet Offensive when it had become obvious that we had won, and they said to him, they said, look, we have to get this right. We said we were losing, and the truth is that we won. And he said, well, the American people perceived it as a loss, therefore it is a loss.
It's unbelievable. And
so
that really...
the logic to that. They give
no logic.
false news and then say, well, that's what the people believe, so we got to go along with it.
That's basically the embryo of fake news right there. Charlie Wiley, we're out of time. I want to thank you for being with us. Charles Wiley, know him for 50 years, and I want to thank you for being with us.